Have you ever felt like your mind sees too much? Like you're standing in a crowded room, everyone's smiling, laughing, talking, and yet something inside you whispers, "There's more than this." That whisper, that's the beginning of awakening. It's not a thunderclap. It's a quiet refusal to keep sleeping. Brilliant minds often sense it first. Not because they're better, but because they can't help asking why. They see through patterns, notice contradictions, question what everyone else accepts as normal. And somewhere along that path, the mind realizes that intelligence alone isn't enough. Logic can explain the world, but it can't fill it with meaning. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But here's the modern twist. Most people aren't even examining who they've become. We live in loops of noise, chasing things to distract us from the ache of not knowing ourselves. That's the real sleep. Not unconsciousness, but disconnection. And maybe that's why you're here, listening, searching, sensing that quiet pulse of something beyond thought. Stay with me for a moment, because what if that restlessness isn't confusion, but a calling? A signal that your mind is ready to evolve from thinking into understanding. If this feels like you, stay close. We're about to go deeper. Now let's be honest, awakening isn't glamorous. It's not all candles and calm breathing. Sometimes it feels like watching your own world collapse in slow motion. Friendships fading, habits cracking, identities dissolving. You start noticing that the things which once excited you no longer touch you the same way. You crave silence instead of validation, solitude instead of constant connection. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "When you wake up, you can't go back to sleep." And that's both a blessing and a curse. Because once awareness opens its eyes, comfort starts to feel like a cage. The mind begins to question everything. Why am I doing this? Why do I need approval? Why does success feel hollow? It's unsettling. But that discomfort is sacred. It's the soul's first movement after years of stillness. Imagine your consciousness as a vast ocean, and your current life as a small glass of water drawn from it. You've spent years studying the glass, its shape, its edges, its reflections, believing that's all there is. Then one day, something cracks the glass. You spill. You merge with the ocean. And suddenly you realize the water was never separate. That's awakening, the moment the mind remembers its source. For centuries, philosophers tried to describe this shift. Lao Tzu called it wisdom. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Einstein hinted at it when he said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind its faithful servant." But we reverse the order. We worship the servant and ignore the gift. When you start to awaken, life stops being a checklist and becomes a dialogue. Everything you experience, joy, loss, love, silence, starts speaking back to you. You begin to notice synchronicities, patterns, moments that feel almost scripted by something higher. It's not superstition, it's coherence. Your frequency finally matches what the universe has been saying all along. And here's the paradox. The more awake you become, the less you need to prove it. Because awakening isn't about being above others. It's about being within yourself, fully, for the first time. You stop seeking light in external approval because you find it radiating quietly from your own awareness. Still, the early stages can feel lonely. It's hard to explain this to people still trapped in the noise. They may call you detached, or distant, or too deep. But the truth is, you're just tuning into a frequency most have forgotten exists. You're not disconnected. You're being recalibrated. So if you're in that in-between space, half in the world, half beyond it, remember this. You're not broken, you're blooming. This is the moment when thought begins to remember spirit. We'll dive deeper in a second, but take one breath now. Feel that pulse behind your thoughts, that quiet witness. That's you, the real you, the one that existed before ambition, comparison, or fear. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the universe has been waiting for your brilliant mind to finally look inward and awaken to something beyond. There's a moment in every awakening when the mind stops arguing with the heart and starts listening. It doesn't happen through logic or books or gurus. It happens when life itself becomes the teacher, the missed chances, the heartbreaks, the quiet nights when you feel both full and empty. They all start whispering the same message. There's more to you than what you think. That's when something begins to align. Your thoughts, emotions, and spirit stop fighting for dominance and start dancing in rhythm. You begin to sense that your intellect was never meant to be the ruler, only the translator of the soul. Lao Tzu once said, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom." That's the bridge when knowledge turns into wisdom and thought turns into understanding. The mind was designed to explore, but the soul was designed to experience. And for a brilliant mind to truly awaken, it must learn the language of feeling again. Because brilliance without heart is a blade without warmth, sharp but lifeless. You see, there are three kinds of intelligence in us: the cognitive, that reasons; the emotional, that connects; and the spiritual, that transcends. When these three meet in harmony, a person becomes whole, capable of creating beauty that heals rather than dominates. Philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are the universe experiencing itself." That realization shifts everything. Suddenly, your achievements stop being trophies and start being expressions of the divine. You're not chasing success anymore. You're channeling creation. And the irony is, the more you stop trying to manifest, the more aligned things start to appear. Because now your vibration, your inner truth, matches what life was waiting to give you. Let's pause here. Ask yourself quietly, when was the last time you truly felt something without analyzing it? A sunset that stopped your mind mid-thought. A song that cracked open a memory you didn't know you still carried. That's your soul reminding your brain of what love feels like. The awakened ones aren't those who escape the world. They're the ones who fully return to it, with open eyes and open hearts. They still work, love, struggle, laugh, but they do it from awareness, not from autopilot. Caroline Myss said it perfectly. The soul always knows what to do to heal itself. The challenge is to silence the mind, and that silence isn't emptiness, it's space. It's the pause between two thoughts where truth finally slips in. But that space can feel scary at first. The thinking mind will try to fill it with plans, noise, worries, endless motion. It believes control equals safety, but the awakened mind learns the opposite. Surrender equals power. In this middle stage of awakening, you might feel torn between two realities: the world that measures you by what you have, and the world inside you that reminds you who you are. That's the bridge shaking under your feet, but don't rush to cross it. Stay on it. Feel every tremor, because that's where transformation happens. In the trembling, not the arrival. And slowly, something soft begins to bloom. A gentleness toward yourself, a forgiveness for your past, an understanding that your flaws aren't failures, they're fingerprints of humanity. True intelligence isn't about perfection, it's about integration, bringing the logical and the mystical into one living breath. You realize that spirituality isn't opposed to science, it completes it. The neuron and the prayer belong to the same divine system. As the poet Khalil Gibran wrote, "Your reason and your passion are the rudder and the sails of your seafaring soul." Too much reason, and you drift without wind. Too much passion, and you lose direction. Awakening is learning to steer both, and that's where we're heading next. The moment when your mind no longer seeks the light, but becomes it. There comes a point when the searching stops. Not because you've found every answer, but because you finally trust the silence between them. That's when the mind and the soul stop being separate. Thoughts become prayers. Actions become reflections of something sacred moving through you. Awakening isn't a destination, it's a homecoming. You start to live from a different center, one that doesn't panic when plans collapse or doors close, because now you know that nothing real can be lost. St. Francis of Assisi once said, "What we are looking for is what is looking." That's the moment the mirror flips. The seeker becomes the light that once seemed so far away. And suddenly the world begins to respond differently to you. Opportunities flow not from effort but from resonance. You stop pushing and start allowing. You realize manifestation was never about forcing reality to obey your will. It was about aligning your vibration with what was already meant for you. You see beauty in places you once ignored, in the pause of a breath, in the way sunlight rests on a stranger's face, in the stillness that once felt empty, but now feels full of presence. That's when you understand. The divine was never outside of you. It was waiting inside, patient, ancient, kind. Rumi said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." Every wall you dissolve becomes a window. Every wound you heal becomes a doorway to compassion. And the more you open, the more you glow. Because the awakened mind doesn't shine for others, it shines through them. You become a mirror for their own remembering. Your presence becomes an invitation. In this state, gratitude stops being a reaction and becomes a way of breathing. You stop asking why me, and start whispering, "Thank you." Even for the chaos, even for the waiting. Because you can see now, it was all sculpting you into this clarity. You've probably noticed it. The more awake you become, the more childlike you feel. Not naive, but pure. Wonder returns. You begin to play again with existence. Curious, receptive, alive. It's as if the universe can finally exhale through you. And that's the brilliance. Not the mind that knows everything, but the one humble enough to stay in awe. You realize that enlightenment isn't about light pouring in, but light expanding out, from you, from every thought aligned with truth. Here's a secret that every awakened soul eventually learns. You were never meant to escape your humanity. You were meant to sanctify it, to bring heaven into the ordinary, to love fiercely, to cry honestly, to forgive fully. That's how consciousness evolves. Not by leaving the world, but by illuminating it. So what do brilliant minds awaken to? Something beyond intellect, beyond words, beyond even the idea of beyond. They awaken to the knowing that they are the bridge between spirit and matter, silence and sound, self and all. They awaken to the truth that every thought carries vibration, every feeling is creation, and every act of awareness ripples through the entire field of existence. That's the radiance. That's the legacy of an awakened mind. To live so consciously that your presence itself becomes a prayer. And if you felt even a spark of that while listening, don't let it fade. Feed it with awareness, protect it with truth, expand it with love. Because the world doesn't need more minds that know, it needs more souls that remember. If this message reached you, share it. Not just with others, but through how you live, how you speak, how you love. Because every act of awareness awakens another. And that's how light spreads, quietly, endlessly, from one brilliant mind to the next. Subscribe, stay close, and keep walking with us. This is Human Wave, where awakened minds rise into a life of wholeness and fulfillment.